Hello, and welcome back to the Product-Led Festival. A big thank you to our partners and speakers for helping us feature amazing content over the 3 days, looking at the core building blocks of product-led growth, from discovery and experimentation to metrics and measurement and everything in between. A quick reminder to join our Slack channel to interact with other attendees and join selected speakers for Q&A. You can find the link in the menu at the top of this page. Enjoy the festival.
Hello everyone, Parola K here. Today we'll be chatting about product discovery and especially what that means for a company. So I start by saying product discovery is today a very hot topic. In my view, together with OKRs and product metrics, one of the top 3 trends in product management. So instead of treating it as the next buzzword, let's start by looking into it as something to be taken seriously and what actually means for an organization. So I'm sharing with you the feedback I've collected from the past few years working with several product teams in different types of organizations about product discovery. Now, we all know this is something we need to build great products people love. But I hope that from this slide, you start getting a sense of the complexity of the matter, which is actually tackling multiple problems within a company. And I'm sure you'll recognize some of those challenges for yourself as well. So the goal for today is not to go through product discovery methodologies, but rather to give you a direction of how to successfully set up at a company level, at scale, product discovery, especially focusing on these 3 areas, which in my experience are the most overlooked, usually by product leaders and company co-founders when dealing with product discovery. Of course, please leave some feedback to this talk, and if you'd like to hear more or look into specific case studies, implementations, I'm super happy to share it with you in the future talks. A quick word about myself. I've been spending in product the past 15 years building consumer products for millions of users worldwide or market-leading B2B products. And today, I serve as head of product management at Kiwi.com, where I work with dozens of product teams together to build our vision of the first virtual global super carrier. Besides that, I coach and advise a number of companies, startups, scale-ups, and Fortune 500 companies on doing product management. I really love product management, and I teach my own course of product management at the University of Economics in Prague, as well as helping as an executive coach at the Haas School of Business in Berkeley for their product management program. So let's start from the theory and let's check what is there. So we all seen this one. It's a neat, simple picture. You have a track for discovery, a track for delivery. But how do you make that happen? Without even considering the fact that there's another dimension of complexity I'm surely not going to encompass in this talk today for a matter of time, which is doing OKRs properly. So even if it's a very risky assumption, I will actually take for granted that you guys already do that part. Another slide is about actually getting the expectation on what should be the outcome of establishing product discovery at a company. We all seen this, we're all familiar with this one, but are we actually expecting product managers to spend 80% of the time or the majority of the time in discovery? Probably in an ideal world. But having coached hundreds of product people in my career, I know that they usually spend 150% of their time on actually product delivery, plus 70% of their time on meetings and Excel spreadsheets, and we're already above the 200% line, and whatever is left is then used to be talking to customers and perhaps sleeping. So the question here is, what's the real expectation, not just the ideal one, and how do we trade this off? So let's start tackling the real world versus the ideal world, starting by the flow. As I mentioned, product discovery is not something we need to do locally for a team, but we need to establish locally and globally at a company level. And the only way to do that properly is to starting with designing our discovery flow. Now, this is a very simple one in this example, but it's already something you start using. And I'll give you a couple of hints on that. First one is you need to consider what's upstream from this flow. You need to consider, this is for instance, a flow in which ideas or product ideas, which is not uncommon at all, are actually informing the discovery flow. And of course, once again, keep in mind, upstream from ideas, we have, of course, objectives and OKRs. And what's the problem with that? Well, there are essentially three problems. First one is the real flows look unfortunately like this one. So somebody has a brilliant idea, usually a feature, they go directly into building it, planning is done sort of on the go, and of course plans expectations are never actually met. Design usually comes at half of the way, where you see there, build more, and only after you ship something, finally, you start seeing how users behave compared to that feature. And most of the times, unfortunately, teams discover that users didn't need that feature at all. So that's the first problem we have with that. And two more are actually about the input and the output of the discovery flow. So I start tackling the big elephant in the room, which is ideas. Now, I have nothing against the word ideas. It's a word I'm going to keep using during this presentation, but we need to make crystal clear what that means in context of discovery. So we need to make that explicit, and that word has only two possible meanings in this context: problems or solutions. We either work on problems or we work on solutions. And the output of your discovery flow is valid problems and valid solutions. And as a second thing to make explicit, and the third problem with it is that unfortunately this is not a linear process. So it's not as simple as starting with a problem, validating it, good, creating a solution for the problem, validating it, awesome, let's plan it and build it. Unfortunately, you need to do usually multiple iterations on product discovery, for instance, in terms of A/B testing for a solution, or fake door testing, or user interviews, in order to refine your problems and solutions until you are able to make a decision on that and decide if you want to build that solution or not. Which brings us to the second part of this talk, which is about the decision-making mechanisms that happen in product discovery. So let's start to see what are the actors of the decision-making. PMs in the first place, for sure. And unfortunately, in some cases, they even misuse their position in order to just make directly calls based on their opinions on what we should build in the product. And if we zoom out from the PMs, there's another set of folks. Usually this is called stakeholder management. I don't like the wording for exactly this context, because for product discovery, these people are actually people working with you in a capacity of a different business function and helping building you a great product, because they have also collected great ideas on the product itself. So rather than stakeholder management, here the focus should be on orchestrating the decision-making across all these ecosystems. And if you look at this slide as a single product team, it's usually already a pain to orchestrate it at this level for a single product team. What we're discussing today is actually to make it happen even at a larger scale. How do we do that? So let's step back to the flow. This is a more abstract picture, but essentially depicting the same concept of the discovery flow we said before. I put stakeholders there in the beginning. As you can see, stakeholders and objectives are upstream from ideas. And what we need to keep in mind here is that there is a decision-making point at every step of the flow. So initially, you need to decide and negotiate and agree on the objectives with your stakeholders. You need to select those problems and those solutions which are promising and you want to go after and explore further. You need to make a decision to understand whether a solution is ready to to be built, and even to decide which one to be first and to ship to users. So when we do that, as we mentioned before, the more people we involve in the company, the better it is. Why? Well, simply because people generate more ideas. So we tend to leverage the whole innovation capability of the whole company. So you can see that one, for instance, is just the VP of user experience, and that many as the few user researchers in a company. Some companies delegate the task of innovating and discovering to just that. So you can see that one just as a CEO and a few executives. Again, it's one or one plus many. And it's, if you look at the yellow footprint in this slide, you can already understand that everyone is better. But how do you get to involve everyone? Well, you consider those stages in decision-making in the flow, and you make that explicit. In this example, for instance, there's a simple decision-making framework where, which is actually reflecting pretty much my philosophy. So I like to delegate to each and every product team rather than just to a few people, a few executives, a few researchers, doing experiments and researching and continuously discovering on their product area. And so give them some bandwidth to do so, give them some margins to do so, and give them even some decisional power for instance, discarding the non-promising ideas rather than taking small risks and building some features which are low budget without approval. And then, of course, at the product area or the tribe level, you can approve larger initiatives that require multiple teams. And again, at the company level, you will confirm the budget for these product areas and approve higher risk initiatives. So the decision-making framework, if you get one takeaway from it, is not just local, it's not just global, it goes throughout the whole organization, and it needs to be made explicit, and it needs to be part of your discovery flow. And then let's go tackling the last elephant in the room about discovery, which is there's not just the happy path. There can come an executive or a business owner saying, just fucking do it, and sort of imposing or dictating to build something. And this is something that in the real world we have to consider and we have to model into the discovery flow. And the person who will need to manage that is actually, in my view, a product leader. So the product leader is not the person feeding most of ideas for that product, as sometimes, unfortunately, it is meant for, but is actually the person managing the discovery flow. And again, what means managing? By the way, managing and setting up. Of course, setting up, as we're discussing here, but also, if I want to use this quote, managing especially means measuring. So what we can measure in the discovery flow in order to measure it properly as product leaders. As the third part of our chat today, and this is an example of a super simple discovery flow, and I'll introduce the concept of what I call the Steve Jobness of certain business owners and stakeholders. So we have the happy path on the upper side, and then somebody can come and say, hey, this goes into JFDI, and let's do it, and without questioning if it brings value, which value it brings, if it fixes, actually solves a real problem, a valid problem users have. What I do here is I tag that item. I still build that item, but I tag it with Steve Jobs that in the company who actually made that call. And again, it goes into the bunch of green lighted ideas and it's being planned. So that at the end of it, we're gonna end up with certain valid ideas that we built because of data we collected during discovery, certain ideas we discarded because of that data, and certain others that are part of the JFDI path, each one with the name of the business owner or the stakeholder that had the brilliant idea. So for me, when I think of managing this, it's extremely important as a product leader to understand what's the split of this. And which brings me to the first metric of product discovery flows, which is discovery versus JFDI. And this is an example of some real data anonymized from some of the product teams I was working with in the past. And you can see that actually starts from being pretty much the opposite of that 80-20 we saw in the reality. Actually, the less than 20% here is being through discovery. But at least you measure that and you visualize that, and then you can make an effort month after month to improve that. And yes, unfortunately, it does take months to get this improvement. But you can see already here there's a positive trend, and we reached out almost a 60-40 split of discovery versus JFDI, which means more and more ideas are actually going, in this case, for this product team, for this organization, through the happy path. The second metric for product discovery flows is about looking at the end of the story. Again, we have the happy path, we have the JFDI, and we plan certain ideas, but we know after shifting them which one of those were actually successful and which one of those are actually things users don't need. And we also know, having tagged those ideas with the discovery data or with the business owner and stakeholder, where they actually come from. Which brings me to the second metric of failed features versus successful features. And here you can see, again, this is real data from some other teams I was working with in the past. And what you can see here is that the majority of the failed features, guess what, come from the JFDI path, and the majority of the successful features are those going through the happy path of discovery. And this is at the same time making you understand that actually 20% of the calls made by executives in this case were real calls that had a business impact, that users actually started and customers started actually buying. But also it gives you a leverage and pushing how to say no if they tend to abuse too much the JFDI shortcut. So with this, I conclude. I'll just recap what we've seen today. Again, when you want to establish discovery at scale for the whole company, you need to start from the flow. You need to start understanding that. You need to step back as a product lead from being a decision maker and actually wear the hat of being a decision maker that needs to orchestrate decision making within this flow with all other stakeholders. And you need to establish metrics for the discovery flow itself in order to manage it properly. So thank you very much for listening today. And if you want to get in touch with me and discuss this further, I'm on LinkedIn, or you can check my blog at paolo.pm. Thank you.